My next one is almost that easy, and I think it's a fascinating one. Coca-Cola, we all know it genuinely did have
Cocaine.
in Coca-Cola. Um, Coca-Cola, very fascinating. It was founded by a Confederate Civil War veteran who was addicted to morphine when he got shot. And he founded it and put all these other things in it, like cocaine and things like that, to stop his morphine addiction. Later, it was marketed to stop an alcohol addiction. And yeah, if you're doing cocaine, you probably don't want to take morphine or do alcohol. But
you don't even want to know what Mr. Pibb did. Hey, welcome back to WTF History. Glad to have you guys again. And thank you again for the 100,000 subscribers. We really appreciate it. Go ahead. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Give us a like, share it with a friend. I think, we do some goofy stuff here, but I think you learn a little bit. I have no idea what Mike's going to talk about today.
So usually we do crazy episodes in history. We're very much focused on people. Today, I thought I'd mix it up and do something a little different. Today, we're going to talk about some of the most interesting corporations and their fascinating histories.
Oh, God.
And I should start by saying there's no corporate sponsorship of any of this. Shame on them, because they should sponsor the show. We've got a lot of subscribers. We have a lot of
Monster
viewers.
should subscribe.
We're going to talk about some of the fascinating histories behind some household name corporations. And I'm going to break this into 3 categories. I'm going to ask you, David, about some of these and see how many. First, we're going to start with a quick mention of some of the certain companies and how long they have been on the historical scene. And that's going to be just a very short thing about how there's some corporations that have survived eras of history. The second category is going to be fascinating names of corporations and what they signify from a historic perspective. And the third and final category today will be the crazy historical heritage of certain household name companies.
Hold it. Do I get points or is this just...
Let's see how you do at the end of this.
There's all right.
There's potentially, it looks like 11 different.
Okay.
Let's see how you do as well. So let's start with a Japanese construction company called Congumi. Has anyone heard of it? David, have you heard?
No.
What is it known for?
Construction materials.
Well, Congumi was incorporated, or the Japanese equivalent of incorporated, in 583 AD. It is the longest serving or longest standing company that we know about. Now, there's people who doubt it, and there's people who say, gee, for 200 years, there were no records and everything like that. But Congumi, folks, can lay claim to be the oldest company. And you think about how extraordinary this is that they've been around since 583 AD and the construction that they've done. Just amazing, right?
Just amazing.
The next company we've got is Lowen. David, what's significant about Lowen?
Beer? German?
Beer? Yeah, this is a beer company. So Lowen was, there are records. It was created as a company in 1383.
Whoa.
It's very well documented. So here you have a company where, you don't see Lowen too often. It was sort of an 80s thing, right? But
yeah, 700
year, 1383.
Whoa.
Amazingly long company. So now we're going to get into the names behind certain companies. And this is where I think, David, you'll do much better.
Okay, thanks.
Start with, you guys remember those floppy disks and, little memory sticks and things like that.
Yeah.
Made by a company called 3M. David, what does 3M stand for?
Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing?
Yes. Ding, 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 ding. Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. It's the last company that you would think would be making memory sticks and
tape. Yeah,
and tape. But that's what 3M stands for, and I think it's quaint, and I think it's lovely. And
it is quaint. They should go back to that, by the way.
They should.
That would be cute.
I've got an easy one for you and all you viewers. AT&T. What does AT&T stand for?
American Telephone and Telegraph.
American Telephone and Telegraph. People, this is something that, guys like you and I know we read a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You say this to some kid who's talking on an AT&T cell phone, that the last T in that company comes from telegraph. They're like, what's a telegraph? So,
it could have been telegram.
Yes, that's true. That's true. All right, here's a fascinating thing. David, did you go running this morning?
I did not.
There used to be a running shoe that was called Ruta, and people would put on their Rutas and go running. And it was a big company. It was called Rutas. And its rival was Adidas. And if you're thinking these names sound very similar, it's because they do.
Oh, are you gonna talk about Puma?
Yes, I am. So Rutas became Puma. And the story behind these two running shoes is that there were two brothers. There was Adi Dassler and Rudy Dassler.
Right.
And their companies existed for a long, long time as one company. But then in 1948, their wives got into a huge fight. And it was so bad that the two had to incorporate separate companies. And Adi Dassler created Adidas, and Rudy Dassler created Rudas. But then at some point, he's like, this is a stupid name. I don't want to go take my business out. I'm going to call it Puma. And so you got Adidas and Puma.
That's a good one. I know that one.
All right, here's one, David. This is an easy one. Here, I'm going to tee it up for you.
All right, go ahead.
Bank of America. What did it used to be called?
Bank of Italy.
Bank of Italy. Bank of Italy was the name of Bank of America, founded in 1904 by A.P. Giannini. It lent mostly to the Central Italian immigrant population in San Francisco. In 1930, with the rise of Mussolini, he changed it to Bank of America.
Good move.
Yes.
Good move. I mean, from the banking situation in Italy, right?
Yes,
recent history. Hey,
exactly.
I got one for you. Are you done with those? Because I got one for you.
Yeah, I'm done. Go for it.
What is Nabisco?
National Biscuit Company.
Yeah, that's it. That was an easy one.
Okay. Well, my next one is almost that easy, and I think it's a fascinating one. Coca-Cola, we all know it genuinely did have
cocaine
in Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, very fascinating. It was founded by a Confederate Civil War veteran who was addicted to morphine when he got shot. And he founded it and put all these other things in it, like cocaine and things like that, to stop his morphine addiction. Later, it was marketed to stop an alcohol addiction. And if you're doing cocaine, you probably don't want to take morphine or do alcohol. But,
you don't even want to know what Mr. Pibb did.
I don't know if you're being serious, but
I'm not.
But yeah. All right, now we're getting into the more fascinating stuff. I promised I'd save the best for last. I'm going to talk with you about the insurance company Cigna. Yawn, boring. What is significant about Cigna?
I don't know.
We've stumped him, folks. Cigna came from the merger of two insurance companies, Connecticut General and INA, INA. And that's where they have the term Cigna. Connecticut General
that's a good one.
Founded by the governor of Connecticut in 1865 and the state legislature to insure people after the Civil War. But INA was incorporated in 1794. The first insurance policy it issued was for a merchant sailing to the Mediterranean to trade, and it insured him for risk for Barbary pirates' attack. So you all know the Marine fight song, right? From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. This is the shores of Tripoli, folks. That was the first insurance policy issue.
You said 1794?
1794.
Yeah, Lowen said, hold my beer.
Yes. Okay, that was a good one. But here's the key question. Who was on the board of INA? INA's predecessor, there was a company called the Philadelphia Contributorship.
Ben Franklin.
Yeah. And this is where I said, this is not product placement. We have not gotten any sponsorship. Shame on them for not. But when you were buying an insurance policy from Cigna, you're doing business with a company that had ties to Ben Franklin and insured against the Barbary pirates.
Yeah. It doesn't get better than that.
Yeah. Okay. When you're in New York, some people here watching might have ties to New York. This is kind of an inside baseball thing, but your utility in New York is called Con Ed. Most people know it stands for Consolidated Edison. And that's exactly why it's a fascinating company. Con Ed, right, was not only, it has a really fascinating pedigree, David, because I know you love Tammany Hall. There were two companies. One was owned by Boss Tweed.
Oh, I love him.
And he owned the gas company. And then Edison created the electric company. And at some point, these companies merged. And Con Ed, boring old Con Ed, used to be owned by Boss Tweed and frickin' Thomas Edison.
Yeah, Thomas Edison was no shrinking violet when it came to ripping people off either.
That's true. That is true. Okay, next, very, very fascinating one. This is our second to last company. We talked about AT&T. You also got T-Mobile. You got Verizon. You got Sprint, cell phone company Sprint. What does Sprint stand for?
Oh, you know what, man? I feel horrible because I actually knew this. I did.
And let me go right into it because
I knew the whole origin story.
Years and years ago, there was an executive at a company. And he said, I think cell phones will be the future. And I think this thing that I'm hearing about that might be developed at some point in the future, this thing that they're going to call the internet, might be the future. And he said the way that these signals are going to be transmitted from the scientific papers I've read is this concept called broadband. They're going to put in the ground these big, giant fiber optic cables where they're going to transmit the signals by glass. And everyone laughed. Oh, come on, copper is the way to go. Blah, blah. He goes, no, there are going to be these giant cables filled with glass, filled with fiberglass, and that's how they're going to transmit stuff. But this executive said we're going to need massive amounts of land to connect the country where cell phones and the internet. So he started buying up old railroad rights.
Yeah, that's it.
For pennies on the dollar. Sprint, folks, is Southern Pacific Railroad Internal Networking Telephony Company.
Yeah, I knew that story.
What amount of foresight did this guy have, right?
Jeez, I know.
Amazing.
God dang it. The foresight on that guy.
The last one that I have for you is, have you, anybody watching, David, have you flown to Europe recently?
I have not. Not this week.
Okay. Well, yeah, when you fly to Europe, you most often take one
First
of the
class.
Boeing. You take a Airbus. That's the company in Europe, Airbus. Airbus has been rebranded, folks. What was Airbus's name in 1944?
Hitler Airlines.
No, it was Messerschmitt, folks.
Okay, I was kind of close.
We're the maker of German fighter planes, German jets.
I knew there was some tie there, man.
Bombers. Messerschmitt is Airbus.
Really?
And so when you take Airbus, yes, their corporate lineage. I mean, there have been other things they've acquired and, different mergers and this and that, and everything like that. But when you ride an Airbus, that technology is, the 7th or 12th generation.
Yeah. That killed your grandfather.
What's that?
That killed your grandfather.
Well, right. Like, I mean, it's and it underscores there's a lot of these companies that have long and sometimes checkered histories.
Yeah, I know. We could do a multi-part show on all of the companies that came out of Nazi Germany.
Projects.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, man, this is fun. I think I was respectable.
Yes, okay. You maybe scored like a 6 out of 11, maybe a 5.
I feel really bad that I couldn't come up with that sprint one in time.
We'll give you a gentleman's C. How about that?
All right, man. This was fun.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.